Hello, welcome to the Bee Vlog. I'm Bill. Today I'm going to be looking through the hives and counting up who's dead and who's alive, and then taking apart the hives that are dead, dismantling them, taking them home, and cleaning them up. So let's go through and do a rundown of who's alive and who's dead. Queen Beatrice is dead. Queen Catherine is alive. They're just not out flying right now. Queen Dulce is dead. Queen Elizabeth is alive. Queen Flora, I don't know. I can hear noise, and I popped the lid and took a look inside, and I saw a few bees walking around, but the cluster looked immobile and even starting to mold. So I don't know what their story is. I'm going to have to take a look inside and see. They might be alive, they might be dead. I opened up Queen Flora's hive, and I can hear bees down in there. Can't see them. Let's listen in and see if we can hear them. I'm going to knock on it and see if it makes them louder. I'm guessing they're alive, but their numbers are getting smaller. Let's hope that with the weather changing, things get better for them. Queen Guinevere is dead. Queen Helen is alive. Queen Isabella used to be there. She died, and I cleaned it out about a month ago. That was the cutout I got from the attic in the townhouse. And they seem to have queen problems all summer long. They really never grew much, and when I opened up their hive a month ago, I found them dead, and I found a queen cell that had been used. Looks like they were trying to re-queen and never really did it quite right. I did find the queen. She may have had mating problems, or just made it too late in the season and wasn't able to get their numbers up. And finally, Queen Jezebel, alive. So this winter, it looks like I experienced about a 50% loss. You know, I don't like to lose hives, but, you know, everyone loses some hives, and it's just part of the game. So let's go ahead and open up the Deadouts and see what we can see inside. So here's Queen Beatrice, and the cluster is here. It's a very small cluster, only occupying two sides of one frame. Looks like there's some webbing over here. I suspect it's a spider, although it could be some wax moth. A spider nest. So let's clean that off. Very small cluster. Probably only about 100 or 200 bees here. A little bit of mold from them. There's no way they could have survived with this small numbers. So why didn't I combine them with another hive? You know, that could have been one way to prevent the loss. I mean, you're still gonna lose the hive because you combine it with another, but I really just kind of wanted to see what would happen and give them a chance. Some bees are okay in small clusters, some aren't. See if I can find the queen here. Bees kind of shrivel up when they die, and the workers look really small. I don't see the queen. I might have overlooked her in the other frame and with all the mold. Or she might be on the other side. Oh, no, there she is. Right here. Is that the queen? Looks like the queen, but got a shriveled abdomen. So do the workers. This is not their normal size. This is really shriveled up. So yeah, that's the queen there, but very shriveled. Dismantling Queen Dulce's hive. I found the cluster down right here in the second box. There were 3 boxes on here. The third box had a few frames of honey, but the cluster's been clustering down here, and there's some honey here that they've been clustering on. So I'm going to take out the frames and take a look and see how big the cluster is and see how much stores they have. This hive was weighing 107 pounds. The last time I weighed them was a little over a month ago, and they were weighing 110 pounds. So they only lost a few pounds and then died at some point during the past month. And it looks like, due to the size here, and I'll pull it out and show you, they just couldn't stay warm. There's some mold on the bees. That's a lot of mold, so it looks like they died probably a month ago, and then just started molding at that point. So to clean this up, I'll clean out any dead bees that I find. I'll clean off the mold as best I can. And this honey is still good, not for me to eat, but the bees will clean up. The whole frame of honey is mostly clean. It's just this spot with some mold on it. And once I clean up most of the mold and set it out in the sun and let it die, the next set of bees will be fine. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about something I hear a lot about. I hear a lot of beekeepers talk about how when they open up their hive and they find the bees head down in the cells with their tails sticking out, that they starve to death. I think this is a misunderstanding of the big picture here. What's happening is when the bees cluster, they need to fill all spaces, and when they tighten down and contract the cluster, and they need to enter in to the comb spaces so that they can transfer the heat from one side of the comb through to the other, so this mass of bees can share their heat. If they couldn't cluster inside the cells, then they wouldn't be able to transfer their heat and share heat very well. So they actually cluster on empty comb so they can enter into the cells and transfer heat. Now, if the cluster is too small, as it was in this case, it's only about the size of a small orange or a baseball, and it couldn't maintain the heat because they were so small, and the cold that we had last month was so intense that they just froze in this position. So when I pull out dead bees out of the cell, it's not because they starved, it's because they just died while they were in their cluster. You can see that there is plenty of honey on this frame that was well within reach. On this frame and the 2 other frames around it, they had plenty of honey. This was not a case of starvation. But I hear a lot of people just assume that bees head down in the cells means they starved. And the problem I have with this is when beekeepers, especially new beekeepers that aren't familiar with seeing the results of a death or doing an autopsy on a dead hive, when they're told their bees starved because they're head down, then they think that they need to feed a lot more in the fall and give them more nectar or more sugar water going into the winter. And I think that that's actually doing a disservice to the bees. If they gathered enough honey, the honey is what's best for them, not sugar. Sugar does not contain all the nutrients that the bees need. It actually has a pH that is good for the disease and mites and other things we're trying to keep out of the hive. Whereas honey's pH is lower and better for the bees' health. Also, I think a lot of new beekeepers might overfeed in the fall and not give them any of these empty comb that they need to be able to cluster and actually cause them to become honey bound. And that's another possible cause of problems in the hive. There's a bunny. I don't know where this rabbit came from, or if it's someone's pet. It's just wandering the neighborhood. Inspecting Queen Guinevere's hive. Now, Queen Guinevere was one of the hives that I had a quilt box on, and I actually put the quilt box on in the summer. So they've had the quilt box through the summer and into the winter, but it didn't seem to help them stay alive, because they're not alive in here. I don't see them up at the top, so they're probably down in the first box. This second box is pretty heavy with honey. And there they are. Here's the cluster here. They don't seem to be alive. Now, Queen Guinevere was a swarm that I caught in the same neighborhood as Queen Dulce. I suspect that they are sister hives and came from the same origin. I believe that hive was a managed hive and not a wild hive, and I don't know if the beekeeper was keeping them alive each winter with chemicals and feed, but it looks like perhaps they are not what I would call survivor stock, because they're just not making it through the winters. So let's take a look at this cluster, see how big they were. I suspect it's the same kind of problem as we had with Dulce. They just weren't big enough going into winter due to whatever problems, and couldn't maintain their temperature and froze. Now, there's no honey on these frames, but there is lots of honey right above them. So you can see the shape of the cluster here. It kind of is a large ball. This cluster is actually bigger, probably about, that big, so the size of a large softball or grapefruit. But I suspect if the queen is in here, she's going to be probably over here on one of these sides of this frame. There she is. So there's Queen Guinevere right there. So it wasn't a queen problem, just a numbers problem, and they didn't have them, the numbers. I know they had mites. I saw mites, and I saw a deformed wing virus early in the summer, after I even put them in here. After I caught them, I was finding deformed wing virus and problems. I suspect that that was what did them in. Not very much mold, which is good, so I can just shake the bees off and clean up the frames, and they'll be ready to go for another swarm. One thing I have noticed in this hive that had a quilt on it was there is less moisture and condensation buildup, so there's less water inside. So I think that, the quilt probably didn't help too much with the heat regulation, but it did help a lot with controlling the moisture.